Hello, everyone. My name is Vishal. I'm a data analyst transitioning into machine learning, and this is the channel where I'm documenting my journey. So today I'm very excited to share what has been one of the most enjoyable projects I've worked on, and this is a portfolio you can chat with. So I've published over the past couple of years a large volume of machine learning blog posts and videos, and I was thinking about how to turn that into a kind of unified, cohesive narrative and how to kind of unify my work to present that to someone. And I've also been interested in the llms.txt standard that Jeremy Howard has created. So I thought, what if I wrote an llms context.txt for my portfolio? And what would that look like? And as I talked to Gemini and kind of fleshed out this idea, it turned out to be a really kind of interesting, exciting process. So I'm going to share what I've come up with. So I'm going to start with a demo, and I have provided Claude my LLM's context.txt file, and I've also given it a kind of brief instruction, and I'll show you what that is. And so now I can ask it questions about my portfolio, as if I was a hiring manager or someone interested in learning more about my work. So for example, I could ask, let's go down here, and we'll get to this question, but I could ask, who is Vishal? And give me a 2-sentence summary. And hopefully this works. Great. Based on the text provided, Vishal has this background. He's now focused on applied AI and ML, specializes in this. Great. So that is what I would expect because that's in the context that I provided. I could also ask something more specific. Can you tell me something more about his agent Fastbook project? So it's correctly said it's my narrow fence project. It's about curating a RAG data set, which is correct. Q&A data set. It has 3 phases. And then there's some technical thoughts about how I went about kind of processing the first steps. And then, a nice kind of strategic connection to my kind of like overarching philosophy. And then I guess one more, I could ask it something that I have not provided in the context, but that it could infer. And I could say list out 2 to 3 roles that would be that Vishal would be a good fit for and rate the fit. So I don't know about this percentage here, but it's giving some research and applied because those are the things I talk about. It talks about the different experience that goes with it, and then in kind of like decreasing order, it goes down, and then there is some weaknesses that it identifies as well. So that's a quick demo, and there's definitely a lot of interesting things you could do, and I'll talk about some of those use cases as well. But to step back and talk about like what was the goal of this project. So the goal of this project was to provide a hiring manager or anyone interested in my work the ability to literally have a conversation with my portfolio. And there's multiple benefits, right? So number one, this allows me to kind of asynchronously have a conversation with that person. So it's kind of like imitating a kind of screening interview. And because of that, I can thoughtfully, curate the pieces that I want to present in detail and give it a lot of context that I could present more so than I could, share in an email or anything that anyone would want to bother to read. And this also gives the hiring manager or the end user the ability to take their time to get to know me, to get to know my work, and ask whatever questions they want kind of in like this kind of safe sandbox environment where, the LLM is not going to judge them on what they ask. And I think ultimately it's a win-win, right? I'm making it easier for the user to learn about me, and I get the opportunity to curate my work in a way that I think is appropriately highlighting my skills and interests. And they can always, go to my blog or my YouTube channel and kind of, validate the discussion and actually, take a look at my work in more detail. So with that demo under our belt, what is in the llm's context.txt file? So first off, I've open sourced this project in my portfolio-llm repo. So check that out if this is something you want to try out and are looking for ideas in terms of the process and results. And I'll go to my llm's context file. And it's just a text file with simple markdown syntax, which is following the llms.txt standard. So there's 5 components. I have a system prompt with some high-level instructions, like don't make up anything. If the answer is not present, state that it's not available. I have a heading with my name and my kind of main focus, building reliable systems. And then I have a block quote with a quick overview of my background and career focus. I start with a high-level overview and FAQ. So these are question-answer pairs related to things like, who is Vishal Bakshi? Give me a 2-sentence summary. What is he passionate about? What are his main projects? And so on. Then I go into a portfolio deep dive Q&A. And this is really where the bulk of the work went into. So this is for folks who have maybe looked at some of my blog posts, maybe skimmed through the titles, looked at some videos, skimmed through the titles, maybe skimmed through the descriptions, and they want to ask, more detailed questions, but they don't necessarily want to watch all these videos or read all these blog posts. So I'm making it easier for them to learn about my work by curating these question answer pairs. So, as just as an example, what is the core hypothesis of his tiny scale lab project? Or when he's debugging LoRa models, he traced floating point errors, and this was the difference in merged and unmerged layers. Walk me through how he isolated that issue. Or his small-scale proxies paper summary mentions this, and how would he design an experiment to test this on a different novel architecture? So these were all questions that I thought, and with the assistance of Gemini, I thought would be good questions to cover all the bases in terms of what I'm trying to present as my skill set. And then finally, there is a out of scope questions section, which is down here. And these are questions that are either not answered or completely irrelevant to the rest of the file. And so I'm showing few shot examples to the LLM that when you get a question like this that's not explicitly stated, you should answer by saying this information is not provided in the context. So to generate these questions, I fed Gemini metadata for all of my blog posts and all of my videos. And this metadata had title and description. And then I asked it to come up with 5 to 8 themes that it saw across my work. And for each of these 5 to 8 themes, I ended up sticking with 8. I asked Gemini to give me a list of videos and blog posts that relate to these 8 themes. And then from those video and blog posts, titles and descriptions, I then asked Gemini to help me come up with some questions. So that was the question generation process. Once that happened, I went and first did a first draft of all the answers as best as I could. And then I gave my answers to Gemini one at a time, and then we workshopped them and iterated it until it was more readable and had better flow and it was more concise and things like that. Gemini and I also came up with a evaluation framework. So let me open that up here. So I ended up with 5 categories to compare the model's response to my gold standard answer. And let's see where we are. Here we go. So we have completeness, accuracy, conciseness, hallucinations, and format adherence. These two columns are my first iteration. I did fidelity and hallucinations. But as I iterated with Gemini, I found that uh, what I was considering a hallucination was actually just the model being more verbose. What I was considering fidelity was a mixture of completeness and accuracy. So we kind of broke those things apart a bit. And then for each of these, there's different layers. So completeness is full or partial or none. Accuracy is, perfect or near perfect. Conciseness is concise or verbose. Hallucinations, none, some, many. Format adherence is followed or ignored, and so on. And so I documented Claude's responses. So here's my CSV. So if we go back here, here's the gold answer that I manually / with Gemini created. And then here is the Claude.ai response. So I used the UI. I didn't use the API because I wanted to simulate the kind of most likely or most frictionless user experience. So I, would give the prompt and the context, get a response, copy paste the response into the spreadsheet. Everything I did was just in Excel at this point. It was just in this CSV. And then just for my own record keeping, here's the model I tried, and I should try different models as well. Prompt type was whether it was a unit test or paraphrased. So unit test is basically saying, can the model correctly retrieve the answer from the context if the question I'm asking is verbatim to one of the questions in the context. So what is he passionate about is part of the LLM's context.txt. And so if it retrieves the correct answer, it should be a close or perfect match. Paraphrased was, it's not exactly, it's definitely not a verbatim question in my context, but it's not too far off. So instead of asking, give me a 2-sentence summary, I'm asking, can you give me the high-level overview of this candidate? Or can you give me the TLDR on Vishal? So these are kind of like semantically similar queries, but I'm looking to test that it gives me the same response as the unit test. And so these were all questions that I generated with the help of Gemini. And for some of these, kind of deep dive questions, I also kind of tried to come up with something on my own. So for example, does he have experience with evaluation, right? That's not a question that's in my Q&A pairs, but there's multiple Q&A pairs about evaluation. So when I ask that to the model, it should respond accordingly. So just to give an example on what that looks like. So yes, it talks about custom evaluation frameworks, evaluation processes, my philosophy around evaluation, domain-specific evaluation, and so it's pulling across all the different Q&A pairs where I have something where I talk about a blog post or a video or a project where I did something with evaluation, and it provides that as an answer. Something of kind of interest, just kind of going back, and let me see if... Yeah, so some things that I think I reflected on as I was writing this. Number one was that my scores were really high. Like I think I had 1 or 2 out of the 120 or so questions where the completeness was partial. Like, so basically almost 100% full completeness, almost 100% perfect accuracy. So those two, that's always concerning when the evals are too high. But it could also be that the task that I'm asking the model to do, which is I'm giving it a well-structured context, and then I'm asking it questions that are relevant to the questions in the context, is not very difficult, right? That's, I think, showing you the power of giving the model well-structured context, which is the whole point of llms.txt. So it's certainly something I could look into, and the way I'm going to look into that is I'm going to ask my friends to try this out and ask questions and see if they see any weird responses or any error kind of failure modes that I didn't catch. And then hopefully some of you who are watching, if you try out this paradigm for your own portfolio, maybe you can share something about what didn't work in terms of your failure modes, and that can kind of enlighten all of us in terms of what works and what doesn't work. Conciseness, I think I would remove, and format adherence, I would remove. Conciseness, I really didn't care about by the end of the evaluation. And I also wasn't really clear, like, what was verbose, what was concise. Like, it was kind of subjective, and I really wasn't getting anything out of it. Also, I realized that conciseness and in general style, which is also format adherence, did the LLM follow an appropriate format? That's also up to the user. Like, if the user says, give me everything as a bulleted list or give me everything as a poem, like, that's not up to me. Um, and so there's definitely some things I would change. Hallucination, I think there was one that had a hallucination. Maybe not. Maybe none of them had. So it was pretty solid when it came to not making things up. And then the last thing I'll talk about while we're on this page is that um, my subset. I had a subset of out of scope questions. Oops. So I had a subset of these final out of scope questions that were not in the Q&A pair. So these were like, in a sense, they were like kind of my out of domain, like unseen test set. And these were all questions that some of them were hard, where like I talk about like during his 7 years in data compliance, which specific state or federal regulations did his reporting systems have to adhere to. I talk about data compliance, my data compliance background, but I don't talk about the exact regulations. So this was something I would consider a hard out of scope question for the model to answer, and it responded correctly, and it said, "Hey, this is not in the context." So these were kind of my test set. Okay, and then I've also once I did each round of evaluations, and I did I think 2 full rounds across all of the questions. Once I did that, I generated a kind of XML style structured version of the CSV. So I have this here. So I have a data set. Each row of the CSV becomes one item, and then each column in that row becomes a different kind of tag. So prompt, gold answer, completeness, accuracy, conciseness, hallucination, format adherence. Of course, here's the response. And so this was helping me kind of do a kind of final sanity check. So I would give this text file to Gemini and I would say, hey, take a look at this and let me know if there's anything glaringly wrong or there's red flags. Would you still use this model? Give me some examples of evaluations where you agree or slightly disagree. And so this was one kind of quick way to get some feedback from Gemini on the quality of my evaluations, and I found that it really helped because it helped me understand, where I could, make some adjustments in between my first and second rounds of evaluating the questions and responses. And then finally, related to evals, I have this short notebook where basically I'm loading the CSV, and then I'm making a formatted string. For some reason, it doesn't show the tags here, but there's tags. If you download this and you open it up, there's tags, model, prompt type, user. And then I'm making sure it looks good for one dataset item. And then I make, originally I was going to do a JSON file, but ended up doing a text file. So I build up my string and dump it into a text file. So that Python notebook is there as well. Okay, I've also put some notes here, and I'm going to walk through these notes as a way to kind of end with my takeaways. So a couple of things in terms of, this user experience. I think it's really cool. I had a lot of fun playing with this and asking Claude different questions. A couple of things I realized that I mentioned earlier. The style of the response is up to the user. They can give whatever instructions they want. So I was more focused on the content delivered. I also noticed that Claude didn't always include the URLs that I put in my Q&A pairs. So I'm not sure how to improve that, but that's something I should improve. And this also made me realize the value of having a custom chat UI interface. I I didn't, quite grasp the concept of why you would want to have your own chatbot, even if, especially if it's using an API like Claude. And this experience made me realize that if I really wanted to curate and control the experience, which I do want to, right? Like this is potentially a job offer or an interview could result from this type of conversation, and I would want to make sure that I'm reducing the risk of the model saying something completely out of whack or something being misconstrued or anything like that. So I could totally see the value of having a UI where it captures the model's response before it shows the user. Maybe it injects some additional instructions. Maybe it analyzes the response and decides, whether to give another response, etc. All the things that could come with a chatbot. I also did a fun exercise where I gave my entire context to Claude, Gemini, and O3, and I asked it to evaluate this candidate for 6 different roles. So like AI engineer, ML engineer, ML researcher, R&D ML engineer, product manager, intern, applied scientist, and then asked it to give it a thumbs up and down on whether it should give me an interview or the candidate an interview, and then give it a rating based on the portfolio of mediocre, average, above average, excellent. And so this gave me a good sense of like how my portfolio would come off to a hiring manager, and that was really awesome to see. And I think it's a great way to do a sanity check on your portfolio, find the gaps, because it did talk about my weaknesses as well. Find the gaps and then work to improve that. On the other side of the experience, I think this portfolio style can also assist the hiring manager by asking the LLM questions to evaluate, different job skills and different job requirements. So you could imagine the hiring manager has a job posting. They could give it the context, give it the job posting, and say, hey, like, give me evidence on why this is a good fit or not. What are the strengths and weaknesses? A whole curation of prompts could, result from this. Especially when the model needs to infer something or the hiring manager needs to infer something from the portfolio, the model can do probably a better job at that because I've given it structured context. On a personal level, I started to see some long-term patterns in my work that I don't see on the day-to-day. For example, 3 of my projects I started on evals first while I develop other skills. And then, as I mentioned, evaluating the model responses helped me identify gaps in my answers that I iterated upon. So to end with, I think this is a really exciting opportunity for me to put my work out there in a way that is signaling to a potential employer or a potential collaborator that I'm really thinking about their experience, and I'm thinking about my experience, and I'm thinking about how I can communicate what I need to communicate in the most kind of frictionless way. I also think, if I may say, it is showing like forward thinking in terms of using AI in kind of a what I think is a unique way. I certainly haven't seen this before. If you have, please let me know in the comments, and I would love to see what someone else has done in hopefully a more matured way, so I can improve my process. And ultimately, I think this is a great way, especially for kind of like non-conventional, kind of non-traditional background folks who maybe don't have the credentials and maybe they don't have the jobs on their resume that relate to machine learning or whatever profession you're going into. I think it gives them a chance to build up a portfolio on your own time in a self-taught way or with resources that are readily available online, and show proof that you can do these things, right? And curate this experience where the hiring manager or the collaborator can have a conversation with the chatbot like Claude or like Gemini, and get a sense of what your competencies are, and really what your philosophies are, and how you think about problems, and all sorts of, again, all sorts of insights can come from this that I probably haven't even considered. So excited to test this out with my friends, and if anyone out there who's watching or sees this on Twitter, excited to see if you tried this out. If you do try this out and you're looking for a tester and you want some feedback, I'd love to help. I think this is definitely a big opportunity for folks to maybe stand out in the hiring process and put something forward that is like a really interesting kind of paradigm shift in how we think about communicating our work for potential jobs. And reach out to me on Twitter, reach out to me on the comments. Let me know if you would like to have your LLM's context.txt tested, and I'd just love to know what your experience is overall. So that's it for this video.